Hey everybody! It's September 21st here in Esmont, Virginia, and it has really been starting to feel like fall for the past week or so, which is early, which is surprising. Usually, for me, September in the Southeast and much of the Mid-Atlantic is still like summer, summer, summer. It's still usually just being pounded by 80s and 90s degree weather until I'm just like submitting. I'm like, please, God, like no more. I'm on my knees. Please, autumn, come. So that's usually what September is in the South. But we've had like some nights in the like 44, 45 degrees last couple nights. So, it's been really nice. So I wanted to talk about, to me, one of the most important and like least talked about aspects of the Southeast in the summertime, which is mildew. I really want to talk about mildew. I think it seems like a lot of people when they think about, like living rustically or primitively or whatever, or homesteading, they think about like, what are the hardest parts about it? And I feel like people kind of romanticize the hard parts, or like chopping wood or killing an animal, or something like that. But I'm going to be totally honest that in my own life, the hardest part for me about living in different rustic scenarios in different places throughout the Southeast over the years, whether that's often like small cabins, old cabins that don't have central heating and air, that are just have the atmospheric temperature, or rustic timber frame little cabins or buildings, and wall tents, which I'm going to talk about today. So just like when you're living in any structure that doesn't have modern heating and air and humidity control, okay, that honestly the hardest part of the year is late summer. I call it mildew season in the Southeast, and it sounds silly, but I swear to God, it is not silly. It's one of it. No, it is. It's the most stressful event of the entire year for me in the South and Mid-Atlantic. It makes me feel like I want to lose my fucking mind every year. And every year I'm like, there's gotta be a solution to this. There has to be an answer. Like, life can't be this hard. How did people do it? Oh my fucking God. And I get so overwhelmed. Late summer is such a busy time anyway, because it's also fucking hot. It's like 90 to 100 degrees, nearly 100% humidity, often. And it's the time of year where you're racing to keep up with the gardens, because the gardens are starting to just like overflow with growth, and you're trying to harvest. And here we had the animals, so just like milking the goats when it's 8 o'clock in the morning, it's already fucking 90 degrees, and the flies and the gnats and the ticks and the mosquitoes and the chiggers just take over your body and mind in the summertime until you feel like you're gonna lose your shit every day. So like late summer it's like a very active and overwhelming time. I think the most overwhelming time in the Southeast. But every year, from about starting sometime in midsummer to late summer, this year here in Esmont, mildew season started for me sometime in July. So what I mean by that is when the temperatures are really hot in the 90s, and then the weather turns really wet. There's often, every year is different, but there's often a real wet period in the summer where it's like either there's downpours every day, and the humidity is just absolutely oppressive. Like the dampness, it's like living in a jungle. Like the dampness is just saturates everything, saturates your mind, and that's when mildew season starts. So this year I am living in my wall tent which is just a big canvas tent. I call it my big cotton house. And actually, I bought this tent, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I have never been a fan of canvas, living in canvas in the Southeast, because every single wall tent, army tent, yurt I've ever been inside of in the Southeast just smells so dank. It's just, they get so dank because of the moist climate here. Because it's just, because of the humidity levels, mainly. That's what it is. And the warmth. And I just hate that. I hate dank, wet, mildewy environment. It drives me, it's terrible for your health, but it just drives my mind insane. So when I actually bought this tent, it was at a stage of my life where I was only planning to use it for small periods of time. Like, I wasn't planning to leave it up all year long, which most people do when they have a yurt or a wall tent they live in. So I was, I would put it up for like a week or a few months at most, and then I would be traveling and I would move it. And I didn't use it in the winter. So I only intended it to be like a 3-season tent and for it to move around a lot and not to sit stagnant. But then this year, it just made sense for me to use this as my main little house here, to have my own private space, which meant, it's been up here since like June 1st, the beginning of June. And yeah, so starting sometime in July, mid-July, is when our wet season started. And it's the kind of thing where if you've lived through it, you know it. If you haven't, I don't know that I can communicate how serious it is and how much of a pain in the ass it is. But it's the kind of thing where, like, you can just lay down a little piece of fabric or necklace or anything that is sitting anywhere that's not in the full sun, and 3 days later you pick it up and it's just covered in a blue-gray bloom of mildew. Like whole articles of clothing, particularly like anything that's animal, like dried body part, like sinew, stitches. My God, I mean, any leathers or hides, oh my God, but clothing, any types of fabrics, wool blankets, wood, any piece of wood furniture, like a table, a chest, leather, yeah, like I said, leather gets it really bad, but even paper, just everything gets covered in blooms of mildew. And it happens so fast. And sometimes, some summers, if my living space is wood, I'll just like wipe everything down with vinegar like every 3 or 4 days, just like trying to fight it. And eventually I usually give up because it reaches like a critical mass where I can't keep on top of it faster than it's covering everything. And I sort of just like give up. So that happened here. I was like fighting it through July, and then sometime in late July was my give up point where like my tent just I couldn't keep up with it. Like I would do a pattern of like once a week or once every 2 weeks, take pretty much everything out of my tent, just like most of my belongings. But all of the fabrics that are covering the floor of the tent, all my bedding, so lots and lots of wool blankets, lots of textiles, and carry them all out and sunbathe them on a line, like all day long. Just get them hit by sun all day long. Take out a lot of my furs and leathers and smoke them again. I would make like smoke pits where I just kind of like pile a whole bunch of stuff on top of it to give everything a little bit of a re-smoking, refreshing. Take out most of my clothes and air them on a line. But doing that like once a week or once every 2 weeks, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of dismantling stuff, carrying stuff, tending stuff in the sun, making sure it doesn't rain. Oh my God, it is going to rain. Taking stuff back in. It's a lot of work at a time of year when you're already really busy. So it gets overwhelming so fast. And it's stressful when all your nice things, like I have I'm looking at my stuff right now. It's just like wonderful books, like a handmade broom by a friend of mine. That's my broom. Like all my great wool blankets, all of my hides, all of my clothes that I love. When it feels like all of your stuff is, you're losing it, like it's being destroyed. It's very, very stressful. And, I'm also not talking about like a little cabin or a wall tent that's in like a really shady part of the woods where it doesn't get airflow or sunlight. I mean, yeah, a scenario like that, yeah, anything's gonna mold and mildew like crazy. But I'm talking about, my tent here right now, I'm gonna show it to you after this little talk. It's a square. 2 entire sides of it are gigantic doors. So both of those wide open every day where there's airflow all the way through the entire thing. 2 windows on the other 2 walls. So there's airflow in 2 different directions, cross flow ventilation all day long. It gets morning shade and afternoon sun. So it gets slammed by afternoon sun. Slammed so hot by afternoon sun in the summertime that I can't be inside of it, even with all the doors and windows open, because it's so unlivably hot. Okay, so even with all of that, okay, with me having the tent totally opened up for all the hours that it's sunny, all the days that it's sunny, and then closing it back up when it's going to rain, it getting hit by afternoon sun every single day, even with all of that, I'm telling you, it became completely unlivable by late July. And I'm not surprised by that. I'm ever stressed out by it, but I'm not surprised by it. Because the main thing is that when it's raining, when there's a rainstorm like every day, no, it's really hard to find like any type of tent design that really works here in the Southeast. It's just not it's not friendly for tents. You think about the great tent cultures of the world. So here in North America, that would be a lot of the plains, a lot of the indigenous cultures of the plains were using tents that you put up and you take down, and then you migrate to a different place and you put them up and you take them down. The dry climate, okay? You think about like the yurts and the black tents and like the many, many, many different tent arrangements of Asia, like Mongolian yurts, yurts of the Middle East, many different Bedouin style tents of the deserts. These are all really dry climates. Like they're climates where there's sometimes like no rain for months and months at a time. Sometimes, I like to watch videos of traditional yurt constructions of the wool felting, of felting these huge runners of wool that are the segments of the tent itself. And I just think to myself, like, oh my God, like, just imagining like this much thickness of wool or multiple layers of it that are creating an entire tent that you're throwing up on a wood frame, and you have carpets on the ground too. Like, imagining that here in the Southeast, oh my God, the whole thing would just be devoured by mildew, and there would be no going back. Like, and it would happen so fast. There's just no way you could remediate something like that or keep on top of it. Like, it terrifies my mind. But yet in a different climate, in a drier climate, that totally works. And it's like a livable tent that's a style of living that has gone on for, I don't know, maybe thousands of years, because it works. So, you can't just take one lifestyle pattern from one part of the world and transplant it to another part of the world and expect it to work. Especially here in the Southeast, it's a very mild climate. It seems like a really easy place to live because the winters are not harsh, and there's a lot of water. So it's very green, the eastern forests. There's a lot of rainfall, a lot of intact forests, so it's easy to grow things. It seems like an easy place to live, but the humidity is what really makes it difficult. So with this wall tent, like the fact that I have to zip it up and close it up every time it rains so that water doesn't get inside means that during the wettest hours and the wettest days, which could be 3 days in a row of rain, the tent is closed up, so it's not getting lots of airflow at the time that it absolutely needs it the most. And that's the killer. That's just where mildew gets out of hand, and I can't do it. I run out of options. So so this year, by the end of July is when I gave up, and I took all my most precious things, like my bags of hides and hide garments and fur garments and wool blankets and clothes, and just brought them, stored some of them in my car, which for some reason works better, and then made a big old pile in the corner of the farmhouse of my friend Bodine's living room. Lovely. And I just slept on the sofa from the end of July until a couple days ago. So it's almost 2 months of me having to evacuate my tent for mildew, because it's not worth the energy of trying to keep on top of it. To just wait until the drier autumn weather comes, when it's worth getting back into again. So that's been happening for the last week. And so in the farmhouse, it's a little bit better, even though it's a really old farmhouse. I don't know how old it is, at least 100 years old. So it doesn't have central heating and air, but it does have a couple of those Mitsubishi units on the first floor that are at least dehydrating the air a little bit and keeping it cooler. So even though the house does have mold problems, and Bodine is actually having mold remediation plan done this autumn, it's not nearly as bad as a structure that's got, no air units at all. So, so I've been kind of working on the tent the last few weeks, getting ready to move back into it for fall after mildew season ends, which is just thank God, praying for the end of mildew season. And it seems like that has arrived, which is, oh, thank God. I was going to lose my mind. So mainly what I do is just empty it out, take pretty much everything out of the tent, bedding, clothes, everything either gets washed, sunbathed for days and days and days, and or smoked, or all of the above. So those are the main ways that I combat the mildew. If it's a wool blanket, whether I wash it in water first or not, I usually just leave it out on the line in the sun for 4 or 5 days. Even if it gets rained on, I don't care. I just leave it out there and just let it, because the sun is going to dry it out again anyway. But as long as the weather is sunny, just to get sun on it for days. And then I flip it over, and that really does it with the blankets. It's really good. So anyway, I know I'm being long-winded. I'm trying not to. The point is that I'm back in my tent right now. Last night was the first night I slept in here. Yesterday I finally finished the weeks-long remediation, and I wanted to share some of the things that went well. I'm also just having a slow brain day today. Yesterday it was Bodine who was like, you should make a video sharing this cool thing you did. I was like, okay. Wasn't thinking on it, but yeah, it's a good idea. And then yesterday, Joan had a friend come over. Emma dropped off some pig's heads and a bunch of butcher bones that we still have to get to today, which was amazing. Thank you, Emma. I think Joan wants to make some head cheese out of the pig's heads, even though they don't have the brain and they don't have the jowls, but they still got some flesh on there. Emma dropped off some bones and a new botany book for me. So I pretty much didn't leave the breakfast table until 12:30 today, because I was just glued to this botany book, drinking Turkish coffee until I felt like I was losing my mind. So it's kind of a slow brain day. This botany book, it's literally, there's no images. It's just one font of lists of botanical names. No common names, just lists of botanical names under different family categories. And oh my god, it's so engrossing. I have to tear myself away. So that's where my brain is today. So here's the big deal. It's just that I did one thing that I've never done before yesterday that was brand new. And I thought it was really freaking awesome. So I wanted to show you how I did it. Which was simply that I smoked the wall tent like a big old hide. Literally. I smoked it. And it was Bodine who was like, I've never heard of anybody smoking a wall tent. You should talk about this. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I haven't either. But I'm sure people do it. I don't know. Anyway, it worked so good. It worked so well. It was fantastic. So what I did do is, over weeks I just cleared everything out of the tent. Like I said, everything gets washed or smoked or sunbathed, whatever. So it's pretty much empty. And then the floor of the tent, which it actually has a floor. It has a built-in, like, plastic tarp-ish water barrier floor, which is great for, like, torrential rainstorms, so I don't get water in my floor. It has its pros and its cons. So I just scrubbed the whole floor with vinegar and water. I didn't want to scrub the actual cotton with vinegar. I don't know, I probably could have. Just seems weird to like acidify it too much. I don't want, the fibers to break down too quickly over the years. So anyway, honestly with the humidity down and the dry weather here, and I had taken all the objects out of the tent that were mildewy and cleaned them, and then scrubbed the floor and all the metal and plastic surfaces with vinegar. The tent was already smelling great. I mean, there was no hint of mildew left. But I still wanted to smoke it because that was my plan. So I smoked it exactly like a hide, and I am so into this now, and I really recommend it. And I almost wonder about doing this in houses too, and in little cabins, just smoking them, even maybe like once a week in the wet season, or at least once a year. It worked so well. So I'm going to show you what I did because kind of proud of myself. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. If you want to try it, I highly recommend it. We're already getting the afternoon sun, so it's harder to film, but sorry. So as you can see, my tent is a square. It's a 10 by 10 square with a tall pop-up center pole, which is nice. Makes it more spacious. So anyway, you can see, like, it's been open now. All the days that it's not raining, it's open. So, like, it's just a straight shot, like both walls open up completely as two really large doors. And then it has two little screen windows on either side, right there on the other side. And then I put flaps down when it rains. I kind of had to alter this tent a little bit over the years to make it better with water, but so here's the inside of the tent. You can see that I'm just starting to move stuff back in. And was able to sleep in it last night. So door, window, window. And you can see that the actual floor of the tent is this plastic material. It's like really, really heavy duty, which in some ways I really don't like, and in some ways I really appreciate. I mean, I specifically bought this tent with that years ago after much deliberation, just because of intense rain. So obviously I didn't want to melt through the floor, nor did I want to burn through the canvas ceiling. So if you don't have a floor in your wall tent or cabin, it's a lot easier to smoke it. But even if you do, here's what I did. It was so easy. So I put the setup back together so I could show you. So inside the tent, when it was totally empty, totally empty except for like a few boxes of things, like some boxes of books that I actually wanted to smoke anyway. Man, it's so sunny. I hope you can see this. So this is just a little setup that I put inside the tent. So I had a cement block. See, cement block. I put that on the floor of the tent. Then I have a big enamelware pot that I've turned upside down. turned it upside down, put it on top of the cement block, just to get some space from the floor so that I could keep the heat away from the floor. And then I found this big terracotta pot and put that on top. And the terracotta pot, of course, has a little hole in the bottom. So in the terracotta pot, at the bottom, I sprinkled in about 2 inches at least of clay soil in the bottom of the pot. And that was it. I just set that inside the tent. And then built a fire in here. You know, the trick is you want to like build up a nice bed of coals, but not a fire so big that the flames are gonna scorch the top of the tent, which I was close. I was very close. But I didn't do it. I didn't burn through the top of the tent. So just like smoking a hide, if you smoked a hide, this will be really simple to understand. Just make a stick fire and burn it down long enough until there's a nice bed of coals in there. And then throw on your punk wood. Exactly like when smoking hides, like all this stuff. And this is all cedar punk, which is eastern red cedar, which just happens to be what's most abundant in these woods. So, you know, just punk crumbled up, just like you're smoking a hide, and crumble up, you know, at least a gallon of that on top of the coals. And then zipped up all the doors and windows, and just like I'm smoking a hide, I just like sat out here outside the tent, just like I'm sitting next to my hide smoking, sat my butt down, and then unzipped a teeny little part of the door every once in a while, just like peer inside and see how it's going, you know, make sure there's no flames, make sure everything's going well. And within no time, the smoke got so thick inside that I couldn't see a thing. It was so thick I couldn't see through it. And I was like, yeah! And it was a great testament to the tightness of this tent, you know, and the stitching, that like from afar, looking from afar, even though I could smell the punkwood smoke, I really couldn't see smoke escaping anywhere except a little bit through the chimney hole. It has a chimney flap. So I was like, yeah, this is tight. So and then eventually I was comfortable enough after an hour to just walk away and leave it to finish smoking and smoldering. So, I mean, this thing was blasted with smoke in there, concentrated with smoke in there for at least 2 hours or 3 hours. So that was freaking awesome. I was so impressed. It was just like a hide bag, just like smoking a buckskin. And then after that, eventually I opened the tent up and aired it out, and oh my god, it smelled so good in there. It was just, I was just like, oh my god, now my whole house smells like a hide, which is lovely, but also like so practical, you know, like, so now like even if there were mold spores in the cotton, the smoke has killed the remaining mold spores, which it's just important health-wise, I think. So like, yeah, it just worked so well, and it was so easy to do, even in a big structure that's all flammable. So like, I would totally do this in a cabin, any little house in this part of the country, you know, if you're having dampness problems. I mean, this is white canvas, so canvas is going to get really stained outdoors over time anyway, especially if it's under trees like mine is, just from like debris. So I don't care about that, as long as the mold and mildew's dead. Yeah, that was really great. So I just say that to say that, like, smoke, I think that people forget about smoke in the world today, and particularly just like how valuable, how inseparable smoke and fire is from a lot of so-called rustic or primitive or traditional lifestyle patterns. Because for one, fire, if you're having fire regularly in your dwelling, that's your dehumidifier. You're constantly drying it out. And the smoke of life, I mean, smoke is one of the greatest antimicrobial agents of the world, natural ones. It's also why it's very carcinogenic. So you got to find a balance between like enough smoke in your life that it's cleansing and disinfecting everything, but not so much smoke that you're going to die of lung cancer. so having smoke, having all your objects really just blasted with smoke every once in a while, I really believe in it, because I've seen how well it works with hides. Like over the years, you know, in the summertime when all my furs and fur hides and leathers would bloom with mildew, of course I would freak my shit, because, you know, there's hundreds or thousands of hours of work and love and labor put into those hides. And the garments, my God, they're the most valuable possessions I own. And they're irreplaceable. So just seeing, especially the brain tanned hides, do more poorly than the vegetable tanned. But how much just giving them a strong re-smoking would just clean them right back up again. And they would smell great and look great. So I learned very quickly like how powerful of an antiseptic, an antimicrobial smoke is, and how important it is for life. So I smoke lots of things. But yeah, I just want to share that. It's super simple. There's really not much more to share about it. Do I have anything else to say? No, it's autumn. It seems to be autumn. I'm so happy. Like, I literally can't. Here's my like crazy squash patch. It's still going. It's awesome, and it's kind of scary and overwhelming. But yeah, it's so great to like be able to be sleeping outside again. Like, I cannot tell you the massive change in like my optimism and mental health. There's the goatees over there. Mental health and just like general joy of living. Like when I can sleep outside and feel the cold air against my face and fall asleep looking at the stars and wake up to the dawn chorus of birds. Like, I think about to lose my mind. Sleeping in the living room and having all my life crammed in the living room. We were all stressed out. All three of us were kind of crammed in the living room for the last couple months. Woo-wee! So great that autumn is here. All right, well, there's some rambles by Victoria today. I don't know, I hope this was helpful at least a little bit. If only just to like open this conversation about mildew season and methods of strategies against the dampness of the Southeast. It's a huge conversation. I'd love to have it opened up more, because it's something that means like sun drying foods is really difficult in the Southeast, particularly in the summertime. You can't store dried herbs or dried meat or dried vegetables or anything if they're not airtight, like throughout the year here in the South. Like, you know, I couldn't store like dried herbs and teas like in a paper bag. No, like they will come late summer, mildew time, like any dried plant material will just be covered in the mildew. They love dried plant material so much. So, I mean, it'll just ruin. It ruins it. Like there's no saving it. You just have to throw it out, compost it. So like everything has to be stored airtight. So I do glass jars, like glass ball jars, canning jars, like all herbs, all dried fruits, all that kind of stuff. So it's really intense. It's really intense. You know, it also means that like in the winters in the South, even though it doesn't actually get that cold, it never gets below zero, and it rarely gets into the teens. Like if it's in the teens for a week straight, that's a brutal winter in the South. So it's often like barely below freezing or above freezing. However, because it's so damp here, like because the humidity is high in the air, like the dampness, the coldness gets into your bones more, and clothing in the winter is challenging, because particularly footwear, because like you can't wear a mukluk style shoe because the ground is either muddy here, it's like cold and muddy, or if it's snowy, it's slushy wet snow. So your footwear is constantly getting soaked. So Joan has like amazing wool felted boots. It's just like the whole boot is just felted wool that Joan makes this style, and like it's so amazing, and they're so comfortable and beautiful, and like all of us are just like, Joan, please teach us how to make our own. So hopefully we'll do that this winter. But you know, Joan loves that style of boot for, I know they've described wearing those styles like out in like, where was it, Montana, Wyoming, in the wintertime. I think also in Alaska, where they lived in Alaska, to double check that, but in dry cold, like where there's snow on the ground all winter long, but it's like, it's a dry snow, so it's not, there's no wetness getting into your shoes. Whereas here, like, you know, there's lots of different options of like different footwear to try, but in terms of like hide footwear and naturally made stuff, I can never get around rubber. So different people do different things, but I have pretty much always been in the rubber galoshes camp. That's what's worked for me the best, because I need a lot of insulation with my feet in the winter. My feet get really cold. And then when my feet are cold, when they get truly chilled to the bone, I can't get them to warm back up again. So I won't be able to sleep all night, even if I have like a stack of blankets. My feet will just never get feeling back in them. So I have to like toast them by a fire, like almost like roast my socks next to the fire, make sure my feet are like super hot. The wool socks are super hot, put them on my feet, then get under all the insulation, and then I can sleep and stay warm all night. But if I can't, it's a problem. So yeah, I just do like rubber boots, like the big galoshes, the big tall ones that go up to your knees, that are usually actually pretty cheap. And then I just get them big enough in size that I can wear like 2 to 3 layers of thick wool socks inside of them. So that they're waterproof, you know, even though they don't breathe, so your feet will always get sweaty and be damp. But if I have enough layers of wool socks, it's usually not an issue, or you just change out your wool socks and hang some up to dry and put on a new pair. That's how I do it, for the most part. So, you know, it's tricky. Like, the dampness of the Southeast is tricky. As I've said 100 times, like a broken record. Yeah, that's all. Let me know if you have, like, thoughts, if you have experiences about dampness in the Southeast to share. Stuff like that. Okay, that's it. If you don't know and you're not watching this on Patreon, you can support me making these videos, including much more educational videos than this one. But you can support me making them through Patreon. There's a couple different options on Patreon, which is the only support I have for making these videos every month. It's a lot of time, and it's a lot of computer time, and I put a lot of energy and effort into it for all you guys. I've been thinking about making another tier on Patreon. I'll talk about that later. Anyway, I hope autumn is coming on where you are. Happy autumn! Bye bye!